Hi everyone. Welcome to English Story School. Get ready to unlock new words, phrases, and skills as we dive into captivating stories that will take your English to the next level. Have you ever noticed how some of the most successful people seem to move under the radar, quietly working behind the scenes to build something extraordinary? And then, one day, when they finally reveal what they've been working on, the world is left in awe. You might have found yourself wondering, how do they do it? There's a certain magic in it, isn't there? The quiet achievers, those who seem to thrive in silence, build their empires without the world even noticing. While some of us feel the need to shout about every challenge and triumph, these people seem to move steadily, almost invisibly, until one day, boom, they've created something remarkable. But the real question is, what's their secret? How do they manage to work so tirelessly, so persistently, yet so quietly? How is it that, even though they're in plain sight, they don't need the applause or the attention to fuel them? They don't crave validation, but they create results so undeniable that the world has no choice but to notice. I remember a time in my own life when I was constantly chasing validation, just like so many others. I wasn't building quietly. I was craving recognition at every turn. Every step I took, every small achievement, I wanted someone to notice. I wanted the applause, the high fives, the nods of approval. I thought success was all about being seen. I believed that if no one noticed how hard I was working, then maybe my efforts weren't worth it. If I didn't show the world my hustle, how would I know if it was even meaningful? To me, success was about visibility, about showing the world that I was working hard and making progress. If the world didn't see it, then it wasn't truly happening. And perhaps most importantly, I thought that the more people noticed my journey, the more valid it would feel. So I shared every struggle, every step, every obstacle I faced, hoping that anyone, would give me that reassurance. But here's the truth I learned the hard way. This need for recognition kept me stuck. It wasn't helping me grow. It wasn't pushing me toward my goals. It was just feeding my ego. I was so fixated on the idea of being seen, on getting those external markers of success, that I lost sight of what actually mattered, the work itself. It was as if I was running on a treadmill, putting in all this effort, moving fast, feeling exhausted, but getting nowhere. The more I shared my struggles and my triumphs, the less I focused on the actual journey I needed to take. I was so focused on showing people that I was working hard that I forgot to actually work. It was like I was spending more time talking about the mountain I was climbing than actually climbing it. That was a turning point for me. I realized that something needed to change. I started to recognize that the constant need for validation, the craving for recognition, was keeping me from reaching my full potential. I was distracted, constantly seeking applause, and in doing so, I wasn't giving my best effort to the work itself. It was in that moment of realization that I made a decision. I decided to stop seeking external validation. Instead of looking for recognition, I decided to focus entirely on the work itself. It wasn't an easy decision. There's something almost addictive about wanting others to see your progress, to tell you that you're doing well. But when I started to silence that inner voice, the one that wanted to be acknowledged, I found a kind of peace I hadn't expected. I didn't need the constant praise. I didn't need the applause or the validation. I just needed to do the work and do it well. So I shifted my focus from who was seeing me to what I was building. The first step was simple. I stopped talking about what I was going to do. There was no more telling people about my plans, my ideas, or my struggles. I just started doing. The mornings became quieter, more focused. I woke up before dawn, when the world was still asleep, and I poured myself into my craft. I didn't post about it on social media. I didn't share it with friends or family. It was just me and my work. And in those quiet moments, I began to understand something truly profound. Success isn't about showing the world your hustle. It's about the quiet dedication that goes into creating something of value. It's about building something meaningful in silence, without needing anyone to approve it along the way. At first, it was difficult. It felt odd to not share every step of my progress, to not celebrate small wins with others. But gradually, I found comfort in the quiet. I realized that the most important voice to listen to was my own. The only approval I needed was my own. I was no longer chasing applause. I was chasing growth. I was focused on improving, on crafting something that was meaningful to me rather than trying to convince others of its worth. The pressure to be seen, to be acknowledged, slowly started to fade away. And that's when the magic began to happen. The more I worked in silence, the more I improved. I felt more connected to my work, more present in the process. Instead of measuring my success by how many people noticed, I began to measure it by how much I had grown, how much better I had become. Each day, I pushed myself a little further, honed my skills a little more, and built something that I knew deep down was worth it. It was no longer about the external rewards. It was about the internal satisfaction of knowing that I was becoming the best version of myself. And as I kept moving forward, I began to notice something else. The world started to take notice. It wasn't because I was constantly talking about what I was doing. It was because the work spoke for itself. The progress was undeniable. People began to see the transformation, and they were impressed. But by that point, it didn't matter as much to me anymore. I had already moved on to the next challenge, the next goal. My focus was no longer on getting attention. It was on continuing to grow, to create, and to push the boundaries of what I could achieve. This journey, this shift from seeking validation to working in silence, taught me something invaluable. True success comes not from being seen, but from doing the work that matters, regardless of whether anyone is watching. And that's the secret to working hard in silence. It's not about hiding away from the world. It's about being so deeply immersed in your purpose that you don't need the world's approval to know you're on the right path. The world will notice when the time is right. But until then, focus on the work and let it speak for itself. And then, something shifted. A subtle yet profound change that I didn't fully realize at the time. One morning, I woke up with a thought that changed everything. What if I stopped talking about what I was going to do and just did it? That simple question rattled me in the best way possible. For so long, I had been caught in the cycle of discussing my plans, talking about my goals, and sharing every step of the journey. But in that moment, I recognized the futility of it. It wasn't leading me closer to where I wanted to be. In fact, it was keeping me stuck in an endless loop of chatter without any meaningful progress. The truth was hard to face, but liberating all the same. I had spent so much time talking, seeking validation, and waiting for recognition that I had neglected the one thing that truly mattered, the work itself. So, I made a decision. I would stop seeking external validation. I would stop waiting for approval, and I would stop sharing every little detail of my journey with others. Instead, I would pour all my energy into my craft, my work, my personal growth. I stopped telling people what I was going to do and started doing it. And in that decision, I discovered a kind of peace that I had never known before. It wasn't an easy transition. There was an undeniable pull to share my progress with others. I wanted to prove that I was working hard, that I was making strides. After all, wasn't that how success was measured in today's world? Through likes, comments, and validation from others? But I soon realized that seeking those outward rewards wasn't helping me build anything meaningful. I wasn't creating for myself anymore. I was creating for the approval of others. And that realization hit hard, but it was the breakthrough I needed. I remember those mornings in the stillness before dawn, when the world was still asleep. The silence felt almost sacred. It was just me, my thoughts, and the work I was dedicated to. The pressure to post on social media, to update everyone on my progress, slowly faded away. It wasn't important anymore. I didn't need to show anyone that I was grinding or that I was working late into the night. The only thing that mattered was the quality of the work itself. As the first light of day broke through the windows, I found myself fully immersed in my craft. It was in those quiet, solitary moments that I began to realize something profound. Success isn't about showing the world your process. It's about creating something meaningful, something that speaks for itself. The work itself had power. It had its own voice. I didn't need to shout about it. It would eventually be seen, but only when it was ready to be seen. There was a quiet strength in letting the work speak for itself. And I began to understand that success is not about the constant validation from the outside world, but about the value you create when you're focused solely on the craft. In the past, I had been obsessed with the idea that I had to prove myself. I thought that if I didn't tell people what I was doing, they wouldn't understand my efforts. I feared that my hard work would go unnoticed. But by focusing only on my craft, by working without the need to share every small victory or failure, I learned a key lesson. True success doesn't need to be advertised. If the work is meaningful, if it's built on a strong foundation, it will stand on its own. People will notice when the time is right. But in the meantime, the quiet process of creation is where the real growth happens. I began to appreciate the solitude of those early mornings. The quiet allowed me to focus deeply, to lose myself in the flow of the work without distraction. It felt as though the world was giving me permission to simply be, to create without interference, without the need to prove anything to anyone. It was a deeply satisfying feeling, and over time, I grew more and more comfortable in the silence. For the first time, I felt free. I wasn't waiting for anyone to notice. I wasn't anxious about whether my work was good enough. I was focused on doing the work itself, on perfecting it, refining it, and enjoying the process of growth. I realized that the process of creating, of working in silence, was its own reward. It allowed me to push my limits, to grow in ways I hadn't expected. And when I look back at what I had built over the weeks and months of quiet work, I was amazed at how much progress I had made. It wasn't about the little victories or the constant validation. It was about the quiet dedication, the countless hours spent refining my craft and honing my skills. At some point, I realized that the results were speaking for themselves. The quality of my work had improved exponentially. I had grown, and I had built something that was meaningful. It didn't need to be shouted about or broadcast for everyone to see. The success, the progress, the mastery, all of it was embedded in the work itself. The world would see it eventually, but by then, I would already be on to the next challenge, the next project, the next evolution of my journey. And as I continued this path, I noticed that the more I focused on the work and less on the need for approval, the more fulfilling the journey became. It wasn't about getting likes or comments. It was about creating something I could be proud of, something that represented my effort, my focus, and my dedication. The joy of the process itself became more important than any external reward. Through this shift, I learned a valuable lesson. True success lies not in showing the world your process, but in creating something of value that speaks louder than words ever could. When you work in silence, without the constant need for recognition, You build something strong, something unshakable. And that is when the real magic happens. The work becomes its own story, and that story is worth far more than any fleeting applause. The key to working hard in silence lies in a simple but powerful realization. Your journey is uniquely yours. We live in a world that often promotes comparison, where it's easy to get lost in the noise of other successes. We see people post about their achievements, share their milestones, and constantly receive praise for their efforts. In this environment, it's natural to feel like we have to keep up, like we need to prove ourselves, or even like we need to show the world that we're doing something worthwhile. But what I've learned is that true success doesn't come from seeking approval or competing with others. The real power in working quietly, with focus and dedication, is understanding that your path is your own. And that's exactly what makes it so valuable. Your growth, your progress, and your vision should be at the heart of everything you do. It's about owning your journey without feeling the need to prove anything to anyone along the way. It's about recognizing that the path you're walking may not look the same as someone else's, and that's perfectly okay. In fact, it's what makes your journey special. In the past, I was always measuring myself against others. I'd look at people who seemed to be ahead of me. They were further along in their careers, more successful, and always in the spotlight. I'd see their achievements and feel that pressure, that voice telling me that I should be doing more, that I should be getting more recognition. It was easy to fall into the trap of comparison, but I soon realized that this mindset was counterproductive. It wasn't helping me move forward. It was only distracting me from the things that truly mattered, my own progress, my own growth. When I shifted my focus inward, everything changed. I stopped looking at others and started looking at myself, at my own goals, my own aspirations, and what I wanted to achieve. I began to understand that my path would be different from everyone else's, and that was the beauty of it. Instead of trying to impress anyone, I focused on the things that brought me joy and fulfillment. I made my growth, my learning, and my progress the center of my work. The outside world could wait. My priority was to build something meaningful, something that reflected who I was and what I was capable of achieving. At first, it was challenging. It's hard not to be swayed by the noise around you, especially when it feels like everyone else is moving at a faster pace. But as I kept going, I began to realize the power in letting go of that external pressure. When you stop comparing yourself to others, you free yourself from the burden of trying to meet expectations that weren't even yours to begin with. I learned that the real focus should always be on what's in front of me, not on what others are doing or what they expect from me. The beauty of working hard in silence is that you don't need to announce every little success, every step forward. Your journey doesn't need to be validated by anyone else because the real transformation happens in the quiet moments, when you're dedicated to the task at hand and fully immersed in your vision. When you make that shift, you realize that the world will eventually catch up to you. The world will take notice of the work you've done, the value you've created, and the progress you've made. But by then, you won't be concerned with that. You'll be too busy focusing on your next goal, on your next step, on the next level of growth you want to achieve. That's the beauty of this process. Once you've built the habit of working in silence, you'll become so focused on the journey itself that the world's approval won't matter. You'll be constantly evolving, always moving forward, and always improving. The world will catch up, and when it does, it will be amazed by the transformation you've undergone. But by then, you'll have already moved on to the next chapter, the next phase of your growth. You won't be sitting around waiting for applause or acknowledgement because you'll be too absorbed in the process of creating and building something even more extraordinary. This focus on your own journey, without the distraction of outside noise or validation, is what ultimately leads to long-term success. It's about building a deep sense of satisfaction from within, knowing that the work you're doing is meaningful, regardless of who is watching or acknowledging it. You won't need external validation to feel good about what you've achieved because the true reward lies in the work itself, in the growth, the challenges overcome, and the personal satisfaction of knowing you've given your all. When you commit to this kind of work, you begin to realize that success doesn't come from external recognition. It comes from the quiet, consistent effort you put in day after day. It comes from the willingness to keep going, even when no one is watching. And when you look back at what you've built, you'll see that the transformation is undeniable. Not because of the applause you've received, but because of the quiet dedication and relentless pursuit of your goals. So, as you continue on your journey, remember this. The key to working hard in silence is understanding that your path is uniquely yours. It's about focusing on your own growth, on the work that truly matters, and on the vision that only you can bring to life. When you shift your focus away from the outside world and put all your energy into your own journey, you'll find that the world will eventually notice the results. But by then, you'll be so deep in the process of your next goal that external validation will be the last thing on your mind. I had to learn that working hard in silence isn't about hiding your success from the world. It's about being intentional with your time, your energy, and your focus. In fact, working in silence is one of the most powerful things you can do because it allows you to build something solid, something that doesn't rely on the approval or attention of others. It's about creating a strong foundation, one that is so firm that when you do decide to share your work, it speaks volumes. The work itself becomes the message, a message far louder than anything you could say with words. For so long, I thought that success was about constantly talking about what I was doing. I thought it was about sharing every detail of my progress, showing people the process, posting every little victory and struggle for the world to see. But over time, I realized that true success isn't about being the loudest in the room. It's not about broadcasting every moment of your journey. It's about the work you put in when no one is looking, when the lights aren't on you, when there's no one to cheer you on or offer validation. It's about being focused and deliberate with every hour, every decision, every effort. In today's world, it's incredibly easy to get caught up in the constant rush of social media. Everywhere you look, people are sharing their every move, from what they had for breakfast to every small step they take towards their goals. It can feel like you have to compete for attention, to keep your name in the conversation, to prove you're doing something worthwhile. But here's the thing. You don't need to tell the world everything you're doing. You don't need to share every small victory, every struggle, every challenge. The constant need to update others on your progress only distracts you from the work itself. What matters most isn't the applause or the recognition, it's the results. Let your results do the talking. When you put in the work consistently and without the need for validation, your work will naturally make an impact. And when it's time for the world to see it, they'll be amazed at what you've built. Stay focused on your craft. Keep moving forward, even when no one is watching, because that's when the real progress happens. You'll realize that the quieter you are, the more powerful your results become. It's like planting a seed. You don't constantly dig it up to check how it's growing. You let it grow in silence, nurtured by the right amount of care and attention. And when the time is right, you'll see the fruits of your labor. Working hard in silence doesn't mean you're avoiding the spotlight. It's not about shying away from recognition or being afraid to share your success. In fact, it's quite the opposite. It's about letting your work pull that spotlight toward you when the time is right. You don't have to compete for attention. because the work you've put in will naturally draw that attention when it's ready. Success isn't about rushing toward the spotlight or seeking constant recognition. It's about steady, consistent, quiet effort. It's about laying a solid foundation and knowing that when the time comes, the world will see it and they'll recognize the depth of the work you've done. So, the next time you feel the urge to tell everyone what you're working on, to share every step of your journey, remember this: the real power lies in working hard in silence. You don't need to shout about your progress. Instead, focus on building, growing, and creating something meaningful. Let your work be the loudest statement you can make. And when the time comes, when your work is ready to be seen, it will speak for itself, more powerfully than anything you could say or show in advance. Because at the end of the day, success isn't about competing for attention. It's about crafting something that is undeniable, something so well built that when the world finally sees it, they'll be in awe. And when you've laid that foundation, when you've put in the quiet, consistent work, you won't need to boast about it. The world will notice, and they'll appreciate the depth of the effort, the dedication, and the passion behind it. So, as you continue your journey, remember that silence is powerful. The quiet work you do, day in and day out, is building something far more valuable than anything you can prove with words or external validation. And in the end, your results will speak louder than any noise ever could. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.